What's up, Barnhill family? Happy 2020. It's a new decade. It's going to be a great 10 years, guys. Welcome to the show, the Barnhill Brothers Combat Show. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm great. Welcome to the 20s.
The 20s, the roaring 20s.
It always looked like a cool time when you look back in history, but now we get our own version of it.
Yeah, it's going to be like top hats and cool outfits. Great Gatsby, but with modern technology, if you will.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's like that. I'm sure the 2020s will be a little different than the 1920s, but I'm still excited to see what happens.
For sure. One thing I know about this year, at least 2020, is we're going to get some bomb fights this year.
That's true. We've already got some slated for the early parts of this year.
So we're starting off this decade with none other than a Conor McGregor fight. So you know it's going to be good. If you're starting with a McGregor showdown, it's going to be awesome. So
and he said this in an interview just a couple days ago that he's treating 2020 like it's a season. And so if knowing that, obviously he has to get through Cowboy and has to have his health and everything, but he wants to take like 3 or 4 fights this year, and he's open to fighting all kinds of people according to what he's saying. And I think we should take his word for it because he's kind of been a man of his word lately and for a long time. But I think just Conor McGregor fights alone, we've got a stacked year.
Absolutely, and it's so funny that he said that. And I was thinking to myself the other day, what angle is he going to take to sell a non-title fight? Because when you're talking about, aside from the Floyd Mayweather thing, when you're talking about Conor fighting in the octagon, there's a belt on the line. So or one or more or multiple belts on the line. So I was thinking, how is Conor going to sell being in a non-title fight? And the season thing was brilliant. I've not heard anybody take that angle before, and it's a great approach because it's, okay, yes, I'm in what would be considered like a contender type of fight, but this is just the first of many this year. This is my comeback year, and if there's anything better than a come up, it's a comeback. So he's selling this as a very worthy opponent, a fun fight for the fans, and a stepping stone to get him to where he wants to be, which he's now vocalized as the triple champ. 170 is in his sights now. He's been somewhat talking about that and discussing a potential fight with Kamaru Usman. So
that's a tall order,
seriously. But I think the whole season thing was a good approach. It was fresh. It was original. But I mean, that's just Conor. He always finds an angle and a way to sell a fight. You got to love that. He's
unpredictable, and that's what we got to love about him, because just when you think you know what he's done and he's used up all of his tricks, he comes with some more. And early predictions, I think Conor is going to win this one, and I don't think it's just going to be I'm not just saying that because I'm a Conor fan, but Cowboy came out and said a few things that kind of made me feel like maybe the advantage is going to go to Conor.
Oh, yeah?
And he said, so this is the biggest fight the UFC can possibly make. It's the biggest fight of my career. And this is why we love Cowboy so much. I'm not going to deprive the fans of the super fight that they want to see to go hold him on the ground or try to play some boring tactics. He goes, I want people to remember this fight forever, and that means I'm going to give you a firefight. I'm going to stand and bang with Conor McGregor because that's what the crowd wants to see. And he even went as far as to say, I would rather lose a fight like that than win a fight through a boring decision or a boring game plan that gets him a victory.
That's classic Cowboy, man. Yeah. You got to love him. So there's a couple things to unpack in this fight. And if this fight was happening at 55, I would say that we don't have a whole lot to see here. And that's no disrespect to Cowboy. He's an excellent fighter, and he's proven his worth. But as of late, he doesn't seem to have – and he's been in – I think this is his 51st pro MMA fight.
Wow.
So it's understandable that his chin is just, and his durability is not quite there how it used to be. At 55, we just saw him get knocked out by Justin Gaethje. So if the fight were taking place at that weight class, I would say that Conor's got a sizable advantage. Here's the interesting things that I think make this fight fun. One is the fact that it's at 170. So what we have seen from Cowboy is much better durability at 170. We know he's over 6 feet tall. Cutting that much weight is a tall order to 55. You know that has an effect on the chin.
It's
and
interesting.
The durability.
Well, it's interesting because he weighs in at 155 regularly, but he also weighs in at 170 regularly and cuts weight for both of those. So, like he's a full-sized 170 fighter that just
who's over 6 feet tall.
Yeah, who also can make 155 if he has to. It kind of looks like a skeleton when he does, but
he looks like McGregor does at 45.
Right. And Conor, even the fights that he did take at 170, he never actually weighed 170. He was always a few pounds under, and I think he'll probably, he's not doing a weight cut, and that's part of what he said in his interview. He said, "I'm not. I sense that one of these two, being Tony and Khabib, are going to pull out like they have the other 4 times we've scheduled to make this fight, and I'll be there to step in when they need a replacement. But I'm not going to cut weight in January and then cut weight again in April. So I decided to take a fight at my natural weight, which he says is 170, but I would say he probably floats at his best weight in between 160 and 170. Yeah. And that's why he's deciding just to take this fight at his natural weight and cut like a little bit of the fat out and a little bit. He's still going to do a healthy fight week leading up to it. Yeah. And, he's not just going to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he's doing his proper condition. Because, weight cut aside, you still have to be properly conditioned. And that means doing cardio. And cardio usually means losing a few pounds.
Right.
So, but there's no question here that Cowboy Cerrone is going to be bigger than Conor come fight night. He's going to rehydrate up to maybe 185, even potentially more than that, and he's going to be much longer. So back to what I was saying as far as what makes this fight fun. One is the fact that it is at 170. We've seen that Cowboy is more durable at 170, at least as of late, than he has been at 155.
Yeah.
We also see that Cowboy has the same or better cardio at 170, and we know that if there's any knock on Conor, it's how good is his cardio. Then if you want to put on top of that the question of does Conor's power translate at 170, well, we only have a very small sample size to determine that, and oh, by the way, that was against Nate Diaz, who is almost impossible to finish. So I don't think it's fair to say that, and I see this out there a lot, oh, Conor doesn't have any power at 170. Well, excuse me, he was fighting Nate Diaz, so good luck finishing that guy.
He also dropped him multiple times.
Yeah. So I don't know. So I think all those things make it fun. I think at 55, we don't have a lot to talk about and a lot of talking points. My money's heavily on Conor. I think at 70... I still think Conor's going to win the fight, but I think it's more fun. I think there's more talking points, and I think the Conor fans, even if they don't admit it deep down, are just a little bit more nervous when they see that big 170 Cowboy come out as opposed to a slightly less daunting 155 Cowboy.
Yeah, that's very true. So I almost look at this fight as Conor's first fight at 170 because he fought Nate twice at 170. But let's be honest, when Nate stepped in with George Masvidal earlier or in the late parts of last year, he looked undersized. And George isn't a massive 170er. Nate is truly a 155er. So it was crazy because Conor and Nate both decided as 155ers to move up and take the fight at 170.
Yeah, well, because RDA pulled out, and Nate said, I'm in, but I can't be in for 155 on this short notice. So it was a lightweight bout. Fought. It was two lightweights fighting who didn't weight cut. Is what it was.
Right.
So
this is kind of like because Cowboy. I don't know if he has more fights at lightweight or welterweight. Probably lightweight, but he's naturally a welterweight, especially later in his career. So I think this is truly his first show at welterweight, and we'll be able to test his power for the first time accurately against somebody like Cowboy.
Mm-hmm. Now let's say Conor goes in there and he gets past Cowboy in spectacular fashion, or it's a good fight, what have you. Anyways, he gets his hand raised. And then let's say that on the 5th go-round, they finally do get the Khabib and Tony fight to happen, and it goes off without a hitch. Presumably, Khabib doesn't fight all that often anymore.
Right.
And
it said there's only a
Tony.
few fights left.
So let's say that Conor has Cowboy. Then Khabib has Tony in April. And that fight does happen, and one of the two of them obviously are going to get their hand raised. What does Conor do in the interim, or do you think he does do anything in the interim? Because presumably if they fight in April, the earliest they're going to fight again, one of the two of them would be end of year 2020.
Right.
And if Conor's fighting in January of 2020, does he sit down and wait until October, November, a Madison Square Garden card, something like that? Or does he do something in the summer?
Personally, I don't think he waits that long. Like he said, he wants this to be a season, and I think that kind of means to us fans that are speculating that he wants to do maybe one fight a quarter. So take one now,
let's say 3 a year.
Yeah, maybe 3. There's 2 names that come to mind when I think of who Conor fights after Cowboy, and I don't think he should look past Cowboy. I'm certainly not looking past this fight. I'm juiced up for it, but the first name being Justin Gaethje, because that's just a great fight the fans would love to see, and they've had a little bit of back and forth. And so the funny thing about Gaethje is he's one of the best wrestlers on the UFC's lightweight roster, but he doesn't wrestle, and he's kind of reckless. And Conor's got that power, and Gaethje has a chin, but after a while it deteriorates in fights. I think Conor is noticing that Gaethje's going to do the same thing as Cowboy's saying, where I'm not going to take him down. I'm going to give people the fight they want to see.
And for a precision striker like Conor, that's like
that's a walk in the park.
That's just a Christmas gift come early.
Yeah,
you know?
Hands wide open and chin up and ready to be hit. He's walking forward. Conor's really good at moving backwards. So that's my first one. And then the more obvious decision and who I think Conor will fight in the middle part of this year, probably Vegas for the UFC fight week or International Fight Week.
I could see him headlining fight week.
Is the one and only Jorge Gamebred George Masvidal.
That would be the fight of the century, and let's put that silver title on the line.
Yeah. And he said he feels like, and I keep going back to that interview he had, because we don't get a ton of interviews out of Conor these days, so you have to take every bit of what he says and just kind of elaborate on it.
Yeah.
And he said he feels like that fight was robbed of the fans. Like he thought the 3 rounds were good and George won them, but those next 2 rounds were important to have for the BMF title,
especially when you're talking about Nate Diaz.
Right. So he said he feels there's unfinished business at the BMF title, which it's kind of funny. He's trying to slide in to be like a he wants to almost fight on behalf of Nate Diaz. He's going to
save the day for his old buddy Nate Diaz.
Yeah, which is hilarious.
And then do the trilogy match, presuming he beats George, which is not a guarantee whatsoever.
No. But that's the fight I think he'll probably wait for. But if he wants to stay active and he wants to maybe go down to 155,
then the Gaethje's out there.
Then I think
that's a good course of action. I think Cowboy obviously first. Then, depending on how it lines up, what Jorge decides to do, maybe International Fight Week with him.
That would be
potentially awesome. A Gaethje if they decide to do something different with George, or if they decide to give him Usman or whatever they want to do. Because Usman's going to have to be active at some point, he just fought, but he's going to have to fight in 2020. So they'll have to slate him somewhere. And the thing about Fight Week is they always want to make a major fight. Right. So you have 2020, the early part of 2020 is stocked. So we got Conor, we got Cowboy, we got John Jones, who's normally the most common to see on International Fight Week suspects.
Yeah. Knocking down banners at the MGM Grand.
Yeah.
And
so Conor's gone, or not gone, but he's fighting in January. We got John fighting in February.
Dance partners galore.
Yeah, we got Khabib and Tony in April, so they won't be fighting in fight week. So
is it? I'm drawing a blank on the March card. Is it Stipe and DC? Is that March or
is that firmed up yet?
I don't. Maybe I'm thinking of a different fight, but I know that there's a big fight.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk is fighting Weili Zhang.
Bigger than that. There's a big fight happening in March. I remember specifically.
I know. Steve,
oh, is there a New Zealand card?
Yeah, but that's. I don't think they're doing that one as a
massive pay-per-view
event. Yeah, they'll probably test Auckland, and then my guess is 2021. They'll put
Hangman and
and Izzy will headline that.
Probably Robert Whittaker will find a slot on that spot.
Yeah. Speaking of finding a slot on the cards, the Conor McGregor card that's coming up, let's be honest, it's not the best of fight cards, but you don't need a good supporting cast.
His back's going to be sore after that because he's carrying that whole card.
Him and Cowboy sells if you put, amateur Golden Gloves boxing in as the co-main event. But we
could put Logan Paul's undercard for his KSI fight on there, and it would sell.
One interesting name that popped out to me on that card was Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now, I think my prediction is Anthony Pettis is on that card for one reason and one reason only, because I do not even know who his opponent is. Anthony Pettis is on that card to save the day if the need be. If Conor or Cowboy pulls out of this fight, or something happens with a freak injury or a missing weight or a failed test or you name it, Showtime's going to save the day. Showtime and Cowboy, that moves the needle to a degree. Showtime and Conor, though, and I don't want to jinx this fight because I want Cowboy and Conor more than anything right now. But Showtime and Conor at some point, that's a fun fight.
Could happen.
Yeah, that's a fun fight. That's two guys that will put on a show.
Yeah. And what I love so much about Anthony Pettis, particularly in the later parts of his career, the stuff that we've seen most recently, is he understands, he was on the Wheaties box. He kind of paved the way for MMA fighters to get into that mainstream, attention and that realm. But now he's just biting down on his mouthpiece and giving us the fights we want to see. Yeah, and I mean, knocking out Wonder Boy, coming up to 170 after he tried to go to 145, and it seemed like he was kind of lost for a second, but now he knows that if he just he's one of the most entertaining strikers to watch in the sport.
He's in a unique situation, and I would say that there's maybe two, or we could put Conor in that category as well. There's a few people that are in that unique situation. The other one that popped in my head just now is Max Holloway. And what I mean by that is you have two guys, or you have Showtime, Holloway. They were champions very young. They solidified their place in the Hall of Fame at a very young age. Mm-hmm. They became very well paid at a very young age. And neither one of them, if Anthony Pettis and Max Holloway walked away from the sport and we never saw them in the octagon again, they're a shoe into the Hall of Fame.
For sure.
So what does that mean? That means now we can have some fun. Now it doesn't matter. Anthony Pettis doesn't have to be the 155 champion to prove anything.
Right.
He doesn't have to be the 170 champion to prove anything. He can make 170. He can make 155. He can put on entertaining matchups at both of those weight classes. So, and same with Max Holloway being 145 and 155. Now you can go out. Max, I understand he's going to go and he's going to try to get his belt back, and
as he should,
he probably can do that. But Volkanovski's tough. But with Showtime Pettis specifically, I mean, he could literally just have fun for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I love watching Showtime. I almost said Shogun. I love
watching him too.
Yeah. But Showtime is getting
not so much anymore. But yeah, I used to love watching him.
Yeah, Showtime, and it's kind of a weird point. You pointed it out to me the other night, and I don't want to jump too far because we still have some UFC to talk. But Sergio Pettis is now signed with Bellator, and Anthony Pettis, he makes good money with the UFC, and I don't think he would leave. But you were talking about how there's a good opportunity for UFC fighters that feel they're underpaid to make that transition over to the PFL. And, I mean, let's be honest. If Anthony Pettis joins any organization, he's in the running for a title or to win a tournament or whatever. Imagine if I don't think he's strapped for cash like a lot of the UFC fighters are. Imagine if Anthony Pettis went over to something like the PFL.
It would be incredible. I think so. The PFL, and we can jump into that if you want. Shout out to Lance Palmer.
Yeah, big shout out.
2 in a row now. That's $2 million. And so that's what got me thinking that the PFL might be and obviously my theory is proven in the fact that Rory McDonald is now over there. But what I think is almost like not necessarily a hack or gaming the system, but it's an ability to go make a big paycheck, and then you can come back after that, or you can do what you want after that. The person that popped in my mind was not somebody like a Showtime, because he's already established and he's already well paid. Let's take somebody, for example, like Petr Yan. Somebody who we know who he is because we're in it. You know what I mean? You just knocked out Uriah Faber. He's an incredible talent. Not that well paid.
Right.
Nobody really knows who he is. If you
known.
go out on the street and you ask people here around Houston, have you guys heard of this great fighter, Petr Yan? Most people will have no idea who you're talking about. So for a guy like him, when you look at the talent pool at the PFL, and it's good, don't get me wrong, there's great fighters over there, but Petr Yan would be the shoe-in favorite to win the 135 division in the PFL.
On a big win streak, top 5 in the UFC bantamweight division.
Yes.
So he's a monster.
So if I was him or somebody like him, if I didn't get a favorable contract that I wanted from the UFC, I would personally strongly consider going over there, taking my crack at $1 million, maybe doing it twice like Palmer did, putting $2 million in my bank account, and then coming back over from a good negotiating standpoint to the UFC. Hey, I just won or even to Bellator. I just won the PFL 2 times in a row. My stock has risen. And oh, by the way, I don't have to take a bad deal because I'm not the broke fighter that I once was when you first signed me.
Right.
I've got a couple million bones in the bank.
Right. Yeah, and your name, with ESPN taking on the PFL, and they will slowly but surely become a bigger name in the mixed martial arts world.
And it'll be great to see young guys who you don't know come in and win $1 million, make that money, do it on the platform of ESPN, and then see where their careers go from there.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see like somebody like a Lance Palmer. Does he do it a third time?
I would.
Or is he?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Is he a big enough name now to where he could say, okay, maybe Bellator or the UFC could use my services, and I'm going to go take a run at that.
If the roster that he's fighting against doesn't drastically change, he's already beat the guys, and the guys that beat the guys in that division. So why not just stick around there, continue to beat the same people? It's not his fault that he's not fighting different opponents. It's the PFL's responsibility to continue bringing in hard competition for him. So I don't want to look at it like a hack into the system, but if he's, let's say he fights fighter A, fighter B, fighter C, and then next year they don't bring anybody in that's really a huge name that poses a threat to him, then to go fight those 3 guys again next year. You can beat them. Mentally, they know you can beat them. Go
and the million.
Go take the million. Take the million again and again and again until they bring in some more competition for you.
Yeah,
until you retire.
And it's like with Gaethje coming over. When he came over to the UFC, he's not coming from the biggest organization, but he's coming as a champion. As even like Juan Archuleta too, coming from King of the Cage. Or
shout out to the Spaniard.
Yeah,
it's been a while since we've seen you, but you're the man. We can't wait. Hey, and also, real recognize real. That beard is thick, bro.
Yeah. Shout out to Juan.
Yeah.
So the nicest guy ever.
He just booked another fight.
I saw that.
I think it's in February 12th or something like that.
Okay, yeah. We'll definitely be tuning in for that.
Yeah.
But coming over, even if you're from a smaller organization, coming into a larger promotion like Bellator or the UFC as a multi-time or multi-division champion, it has that allure to it. It's like even like
it's a selling point
with Ben Askren. Like he came over and honestly didn't perform very well in the UFC, but my God, did he have some hype behind him when he came over?
Yeah, and he did a lot for the UFC in that he reinvented the George Masvidal we know today. Because if it weren't for that, George had an incredible year, and he deserves all the credit. but it takes two to tango, and he wasn't willing to trash talk. You could see that when he fought Nate Diaz. They didn't really trash talk each other. Ben came in like a classic heel. Like, even though he was trying to be the witty, nice guy, and George was like this gangster, you wanted the gangster to win, shut the mouth up.
This loudmouth, curly-headed guy from the suburbs,
who nobody
would, he put it, with a pair of sandals and a whatever.
So you get the 3-second knockout, and that really just rose, or sent him to the moon. And I think Ben Askren did a lot for the sport by losing.
Well, we've talked about this before off camera, and that's how everybody sees the trade between Demetrius Johnson and, well, it's not really a trade, essentially. It's allowing two contracts to expire and then allowing
which was historical.
To then sign those people. But we'll call it a trade just to make it easy. The first trade in MMA history, everybody's saying, oh, look at, after Askren's performance, the UFC got the
raw
shit into this stick. And so when you look at it deeply, though, you can't just compare Askren to Mighty Mouse, because without that trade, George Masvidal is never born.
Right.
The BMF title never happens. Dwayne Johnson's never in the cage giving
a belt away.
So I personally, and as much of a DJ fan as I am, and I think he's one of the most skilled fighters still in the world today, it made for some excitement. It made for some real excitement at the welterweight division, which is one of the storied, decorated divisions in all of MMA. And so I think it was a good move, and I think that it's what gave us the BMF belt and the George Masvidal that we know today.
And we finally got to see Ben Askren compete, and he came up short, and he's the first to admit that. That's why I love Ben Askren. But it would have felt unfinished if he never stepped foot in the octagon.
But he showed he could compete with the UFC's best.
Right. I mean, he won. He won
Robbie
a fight.
Lawler.
Yeah.
Say what you will about the fight, but he got his hand raised. Robbie Lawler's a great former champion.
Put up a fight against the best grappler in UFC's history,
Damian Maia. And he got caught by George Masvidal. That happens. Everybody gets caught at one point or another.
But for a fighter that only fought 3 times in the UFC, he sure did do some numbers. He definitely brought some attention to the division that he was fighting in, and sold the fights. And that's what Dana. That's why I'm sure Dana is happy with the trade. Yeah. Because I don't know. To be honest, I'm a fan. I don't know what DJ's doing over there. I know he's winning, but I don't know who he's fighting. I don't know how he's winning. I don't know, the story. One championship. I think they've got a massive fan base over there, and so they're not as adamant on selling fights over here. But I haven't heard. It's been radio silence since he kind of moved over there, unless you watched that first card where Eddie Alvarez got knocked out and he won, but it was a tough fight, and I think Gary Tonin was on that card, and who was the other one? Sage.
Yeah, they definitely need to do better at getting the American fan base engaged.
Yeah.
Us as even mega fans, I am still confused sometimes as to when and where these shows are taking place.
Right.
All right, let's get into some questions. I think you got a question for me?
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do something, but this ties in perfectly with it. So Clarissa Shields, now she showed up for the UFC fight the other night that Amanda Nunes won, and she was sitting courtside. She was sitting octagon side, and they interviewed her and stuff like that, and she's come out and made it clear that she thinks that Amanda Nunes is afraid to fight her. And not in boxing, in MMA. Amanda Nunes is afraid to fight a boxer that's never done it before. And her reason for that is that Amanda Nunes said in the interview after she won her belt against Romain Durandarine, who's the best striker in women's Muay Thai, basically history, and who also has 7 years of jiu-jitsu and wrestling background, that Amanda Nunes saying in her interview that she would definitely go ahead and take me down and submit me is a clear sign that she's afraid to stand up and box with me. Now, I think that it's laughable that she's calling out Amanda Nunes and is confident enough to say that she would step in the MMA octagon with her, and then now she's saying like almost as if she'd be the favorite. So I just want to know what you think.
Well, what is she saying she's going to do about grappling?
Well, she said she's going to once she starts learning how to do some jiu-jitsu and some wrestling, she'll be able to negate Amanda Nunes' wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Keep in mind, Amanda Nunes had some perfectly timed takedowns in that fight, and she's a monster on the ground. Black belt.
Yeah.
Got it tattooed on her.
So let's unpack that, because that's obviously ridiculous.
Right.
So Clarissa Shields, before I break down her argument, I will give her credit for what she has accomplished. She is a phenomenal boxer. She's the most dominant female boxer in the world right now. She's very skilled. She's also doing something that not a lot of boxers are doing, which is trying to build and promote themselves in ways that are unconventional.
Right.
Instead of just sitting back and crying that my promoter hasn't promoted me properly and boo-hoo.
And there's also no one for her to fight. So she's kind of like in a land of no one, and she's looking for anything that will catch highlights. And
So this whole notion that I'm going to do a little I'm going to do a little wrestling and I'm going to do a little jiu-jitsu, and then that'll cover that base for me. That reminds me of when I first started jiu-jitsu, thinking that, I'll just go in and learn a few moves. There's got to be a couple of neck techniques.
I think I know how to do an arm
bar. I'm
bar.
going to be able to just learn and then go apply on the streets like I took some weekend seminar and now I'm a master. So what she's going to quickly find out is that she is the very bottom of the totem pole, and it takes decades to reach the level that Amanda is at.
Right.
And then let's look at Conor McGregor, a brown belt. Did he go learn a little jiu-jitsu and then go just get absolutely manhandled on the ground by Khabib? No, he spent years of his life perfecting that craft, years of his life rolling with high-level guys like Dylan Dennis, and what happened? He still got taken down and held down without his will.
It's inevitable.
Against his will. Let's take another person that Khabib fought, for example, Edson Barbosa, another jiu-jitsu phenom.
From jiu-jitsu
Brazil,
mecca.
From the jiu-jitsu mecca, taken down, held down, and destroyed. Jermaine Durandamine, also, she grapples every day as part of her training,
right,
taken down and destroyed. So this notion that I'm going to do a little grappling doesn't work,
right,
because doing a little grappling against a guy, or in this case, a gal who's a black belt, who's got a black belt tattoo on them that obviously shows how much jiu-jitsu means to that person, being that she's from Brazil, that's where she started her martial arts career. And she's
also the greatest female fighter that's ever lived.
And by the way, she's training at ATT, where her wrestling has just blossomed over the last couple of fights. So,
and their boxing coaches are great too. Not to forget that Amanda Nunes is starching most of the girls she's beating.
Now, do I think Amanda could go out there and outbox Clarissa? No, but what Clarissa is going to realize is that she's made a miscalculation. There is no way that you can go do a little grappling and negate the onslaught of a high-end grappler or high-level grappler like Amanda Nunes.
And
it's just not going to happen.
In that statement, it shows how little she knows about mixed martial arts. The other aspect of the fight that she's totally forgetting about, and no boxers, you can ask them. There's multiple interviews of multiple boxers talking about this. Leg kicks.
Yeah, I mean, when has she ever?
Boxers fight very heavy in the front foot because you have to do a lot of pivoting and rolling and slipping, and you can't do that from your back foot as much. It's mostly a front foot heavy dominant sport. And you see it time and time again. Look at Nate Diaz, for example. He's a boxer when it comes to striking, and his leg gets eaten up in almost every fight he fights in with somebody who knows how to throw kicks. Amanda Nunes knows how to throw kicks. Yeah. If she takes Clarissa Shields' leg out in the first round, and she could win that fight only throwing leg kicks.
Yeah, and it's not even just from the perspective of how much damage is the leg kick going to do. Boxing is very rhithmic and very timing oriented. Those leg kicks and those push oblique kicks, those completely throw the timing off. And if you're not used to seeing those, then even a great boxer like Clarissa could make a miscalculation and get caught. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that Amanda's, if she were to knock Clarissa out, that she's a better boxer. No, she has more tools when it comes to striking. So she was able to utilize one of those tools to set a trap and then get a knockout shot. I think it's fun. I don't think there's a lot for Amanda to do in the 135 and 145 women's division right now. So it's a fun fight. I just think Shields has made a miscalculation, and I think that if they do make that fight, when she starts training, it'll be interesting to see when she starts training and they bring in real people for her to grapple with, if she either backs out of the fight, tries to postpone it, changes her tune, or what have you. Because it took me going and getting my ass kicked in the gym to realize there's a lot more to learn than doing some grappling. Yeah, it's a lifestyle and years of dedication to a craft. It's ridiculous as me saying that I'm going to go do a little boxing and go win Golden Gloves in the state of Texas. Yeah, I'm going to go do a little boxing and go to the Olympics. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. You do a little bit of boxing every day for a decade, and then maybe you can do that. Yeah. But it's just it's a miscalculation. So.
It's a little bit disrespectful in my opinion. I get that she has no one else really in female boxing to call out. There's really no names in female boxing, and one interesting thing in my opinion, because the numbers aren't exactly out there for us to know, but speculation and what Dana has said and stuff like that makes me believe that it's not common, but the boxer in this situation is getting paid less than the MMA fighter. I think Amanda Nunes is paid better for her fights, especially as the champion, than Clarissa Shields is.
Well, that's true. That's why you could never entice somebody like Canelo to come over,
right?
Or you could never somebody who's
making so much more money than everybody.
Tyson Fury, he says he's coming over, and if anybody were to do it, Tyson, because he's made it very clear with his donations of his purse and things like that he's not driven by money at this point in his life. And
I think he would do decent numbers too. If he's making 10, 20 million for a fight right now, I could see him with pay-per-view numbers on the right card against the right opponent, Francis Ngannou or something, being able to pull some serious numbers.
Now take what I just said about, taking years to dedicate yourself to a craft and whatnot. There are some fun MMA fights for Tyson, and the reason being is you could put him against a guy like a Francis Ngannou who doesn't have that multi-decade experience in jiu-jitsu.
He actually wanted to be a boxer.
Striking game, and Tyson's game is a striking game. So yes, Ngannou's a better grappler than Tyson Fury because he grapples. Tyson Fury doesn't, but he's not an elite level grappler like a Daniel Cormier or like a Khabib or like a Brian Ortega. Right. So if you put Tyson if you gave Tyson a year, 18 months to work on his wrestling and work on his jiu-jitsu and just defense, and then you put him in there against a Francis Ngannou who's going to throw mainly heavy punches just like Tyson's, now you have a fun fight. But this Clarissa Shields and Amanda thing, that's a mismatch at the highest level.
Yeah. And she'd be cutting down. She cuts currently to like 153, 160. Yeah. So
Shields does?
Yeah. So she would have to cut to 145. I'm sure Amanda would take it if the money's right and, the belt's on the line, obviously, because she holds the belt. But it's just funny to me how after everything we've seen, it's 2020. It's been since the 90s that people realized that boxers can't fight in MMA. They can hardly compete. And when they do and they don't take the grappling aspect and the other aspects of MMA seriously, they get mollywopped. And it's funny because it's almost like she just hasn't paid attention to any of the history of the sports.
I mean, great boxing skill has its place in MMA. Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, George Masvidal. I'm circling the BMF contestants potentially, but Stipe Miocic. There's a lot. Great
Peter
boxing
Yan
has its place, but not without covering those other bases. All right, Nick. So my question for you before we wrap up here is a rapid fire question.
Yes.
So I want you to rapid fire end of 2020, first year of the new decade, all of the champs in the UFC, starting with the women's 115, finishing out the women, starting with the men at 125, presuming there's going to be a 125, and going from there.
Yeah, I got to set up for this one. All right, hit me.
All right, women's 115.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Ooh, women's 125.
Valentina Shevchenko. Easy.
Well, women's 135.
Easier. Amanda Nunes.
I was going to say, Shav, just put 135 and 145 together. Women's 145.
Amanda Nunes. And then they'll fold up probably because...
Probably so. Yeah. All right, so now on to the gentlemen.
On to the boys,
to the gentlemen. All right, 125.
Joseph Benavidez?
Okay, 35.
All right, this is crazy. Henry Cejudo.
Okay, 145.
Volkanovski.
Okay, 55.
Conor McGregor.
Don't you say it.
No.
7.
Tony Ferguson, because I think he's going to fight Khabib, and then I think that belt's going to be tied up for the year.
170.
Conor McGregor. No. Kamaru Usman.
Okay, 85.
With one potential
caveat.
1A. George St. Pierre.
Ooh, okay. 85.
Israel Adesanya.
Okay. 205.
That's the easiest one of all. John Jones.
265. Heavyweight.
John Jones.
Ooh, okay. All right, I'm going to do the same. Go for it.
All right. Women's 115.
Wei Li Zhang.
Okay. 25.
The Bullet, Valentina.
35.
Same
45.
One. Yes.
Nunes,
Amanda Nunes.
The Lioness, a.k.a. the GOAT. All right, on to the men. 125.
Joseph Benavidez.
Yeah, I don't know who he's fighting, but he's fighting somebody soon. 35.
Petr Yan.
I would love to see that. 45.
45. Max Holloway.
You think so?
Mm-hmm. With I'll do a one. This one I'll take my 1A. Potentially Zabit Magomed Sharipov.
Okay. Yeah, because I know he's going to be in the race this year.
Yeah, he's going to get a shot this year. So
which by the way, I want to see him versus Yair Rodriguez this year.
Ooh, yes, I do that.
And that can be the contender fight. But okay, 55.
55. Tony Ferguson.
Okay, yeah. 70.
Kamaru Usman.
85.
Yoel Romero.
He hasn't made weight. He hasn't made 185 in his last 3 fights.
I think I'm going to surprise you with a shocker here. If he can beat the scale, then I think he can beat Adesanya. We'll break that down on another episode. But if he can beat the scale, he should have already been champion once. His test is the scale.
Yeah. So, but in my opinion, and this is where if I was Dana White, I would. If you miss weight twice, you must take your next fight at the weight class above where you're at,
which would take us to 205.
205.
And my champion there is Johnny Bones Jones.
And 265 heavyweight.
265. I'm going to go Stipe Miocic, and the only reason is I'm going with Stipe is because I don't think John will. I don't think Stipe will contest the belt twice this year. So I think he beats Cormier again, and I think John gets past Reyes, obviously, but I don't think they make that matchup until 2021. So that's the only reason I'm saying that. But Stipe Miocic as heavyweight.
Yeah.
Guys, that does it for another episode of the Barnhill Brothers Show.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that last little segment of the Rapid Fire. We try to give you guys a new little segment type of thing, questions for both of us every
Comment
week.
below. Tell us what you like. Tell us if you have a question you want us to answer.
Yeah. We want it to be juicy. And what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say if you like what you hear and you enjoy watching us, we'd be honored for you to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification.
Yeah, think about it like multi-leveled. You tell a friend and then they tell their friends and then their friends tell their friends and pretty soon you'll be at the top of the pyramid.
Not how YouTube subscriptions work.
Anyways, tell your friends about it. They don't want to miss this stuff either.
Every Wednesday, guys, we're dropping fire.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
Take care.